Today we are looking at Judges chapter 12. And we're going to pick up right where we left off with our good friend Jephthah. And remember, Jephthah was an individual who was told by God initially that he was a mighty man of valor. But when you look at Jephthah's life, the culture and society didn't call him that because he was the son of a what? Of a prostitute. He was born from a harlot. And yet it's interesting that we talked about how God will shine his light in places of darkness. Somebody like that culture that Jephthah lived in would not say, well, the son of this harlot, the son of this prostitute, is never going to become anything worthwhile. Certainly is not going to be used of God. But that's the beauty of God. He shines light in places of darkness. In spite of Jephthah's heritage, in spite of where he came from, in spite of his family dynamic and circumstances, he was still able to be used of God. And so we saw that in the last chapter. And so we're picking up now here in chapter 12, and it's continuing on some of the life of Jephthah until he passes. And then it's going to show us three other kings, or I should say three other judges. And we're going to take a look at those and examine their life. So let's go ahead and get right into the reading. Let's take a listen here to Judges chapter 12.
Chapter 12. And the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and went northward, and said unto Jephthah, Wherefore passest thou over to fight against the children of Ammon, and didst not call us to go with thee? We will burn thine house upon thee with fire. And Jephthah said unto them,
I and my people were in great strife with the children of Ammon, and when I called you, ye delivered me not out of their hands. And when I saw that ye delivered me not, I put my life in my hands, and passed over against the children of Ammon, and the Lord delivered them into my hand. Wherefore then are ye come up unto me this day, to fight against me?
Then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead, and fought with Ephraim. And the men of Gilead smote Ephraim, because they said,
Ye Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites, and among the Manassites.
And the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites. And it was so, that when those Ephraimites which were escaped said,
Let me go over.
that the men of Gilead said unto him,
Art thou an Ephraimite?
If he said,
Nay.
then said they unto him,
Say now Shibboleth.
and he said, Siboleth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. Then they took him and slew him at the passages of Jordan, and there fell at that time of the Ephraimites 42,000. And Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then died Jephthah the Gileadite, and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. And after him Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel. And he had 30 sons and 30 daughters, whom he sent abroad, and took in 30 daughters from abroad for his sons. And he judged Israel 7 years. Then died Ibzan, and was buried at Bethlehem. And after him Elon, a Zebulunite, judged Israel, and he judged Israel 10 years. And Elon the Zebulunite died, and was buried in Aijalon, in the country of Zebulun. And after him Abdon the son of Hillel, a Pirathonite, judged Israel. And he had 40 sons and 30 nephews, that rode on 70 ass colts. And he judged Israel 8 years. And Abdon the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, died, and was buried in Pirathon, in the land of Ephraim, in the mount of the Amalekites. Chapter.
All right, so there we go, chapter 12. Very straightforward chapter. I think it tells us a lot of things, but I think we there are some things that we can kind of scratch and dig a little and get a little of the underlying meaning behind some of these statements, and then see how we can apply it to our life today and to our culture today. And that's the beauty of what the scripture is. The scripture is something that if you go through it properly and you are humble enough to apply it to your own life, it will become a mirror and show you more of who you are. And that's what we want to look at today. And so like we always say, when we look at chapter 12, it starts with the word and we already talked about what this chapter is connected to. This is not the beginning of the story of Jephthah, but it's connecting and adding more to his narrative. So it starts off and it says, and the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and went northward, and said unto Jephthah. So we got the men of Ephraim. They got something to say to Jephthah. And you're wondering, okay, Jephthah, we just saw how Jephthah got great victory over the enemy when they came to oppress him. Remember, the Israelites didn't want Jephthah to even be around them. But then when the Amorites came to fight, they said, well, you know what? Jephthah may have been born of a harlot, but we know that this guy's got some ability to fight and to lead armies. Why? Because that was a gift God gave him. God already told Jephthah, in spite of how you were born, you are a mighty man of valor. And so he went out and he fought the battle. So now we see here in 12, Ephraim gathered themselves together and they went northward and said unto Jephthah, wherefore passest thou over to fight against the children of Ammon, and didst not call us to go with you? So it's like, they're like, okay, we see you got the victory, but you didn't come and ask us. It's funny how some people like to be involved in something after it has succeeded. You've already gotten the victory, and now people want to know, well, how come you didn't help me? Because they want to be part of the spoil. But Jephthah's going to put them in their place. He's going to let them know, listen, I don't know why you coming to me like this, because we actually did request your help. But let's take a look and see what Jephthah says. The men of Ephraim are still complaining. And keep this in mind. This is now internal. This isn't an outside nation. This is all internal. This is like the internal battle. This would be kind of like how Texas and New York kind of battle back and forth with the immigrant situation that we have here in the United States. You got one nation, but you got people fighting amongst themselves on how and why things should be done. And so we see here, even in the children of Israel, we got this internal battle here going on, when God is just trying to get them to be godly people, and they can't seem to just get along with themselves. But it goes on in Ammon, and let me just read this again. It says, wherefore passest thou over to fight against the children of Ammon, and didst not call us to go with thee? Now, here's their statement after they make that question. We will burn thy house upon thee with fire. Now, they still do not have a lot of respect for Jephthah. They still see him as kind of like, you're a half-breed. We know your daddy was a Jew, part of the Jewish tribes, but your mama was something else. And we don't know what she was, and so they still are not giving him the proper respect. Still, you got the victory and everything, and we're glad that the Ammonites are gone. And you should have called us for help. But I tell you what, we're not happy with how you did the victory. You got the victory, but we're not happy with how you got it, and we're going to burn your house down. That's terrorism within the nation that we got going on. Boy, we see this in America, and we definitely see this in our past. No matter how much a certain people were successful, a lot of times people weren't happy. They were jealous of whatever success you had, and they went and tried to find ways to take it. Although they didn't produce any of the effort that got the victory. Look at what Jephthah says in verse 2. And Jephthah said unto them, I and my people were at great strife with the children of Ammon. And when I called you, ye delivered me not out of their hand. So Jephthah's letting them know, you were given a message. You were told. And you chose to ignore it, act ignorant, act like you didn't hear it, pretend you didn't even know about it. Right? Because you didn't want to get into the battle. Right? See, a lot of times, the key is, do you want to actually get into the fight? Sometimes people, there are people that are happy. I just want to be on the team, but I don't want to play. You get it. Or you're going to get on the football field and you're going to bang and hit and knock and push. Oh, no, I just want to be on the team. And if we win, I'll celebrate. And if we don't win, then I can be like, well, they didn't put me in. Maybe that's why we didn't. You're always trying to find an angle. And it's sad, but true, that a lot of human emotions and human actions are similar to this. Sometimes we can even find that within our own selves, things that we were like, well, I'm glad I didn't get involved, but once we got it solved, I want to celebrate with the celebration as well. But sometimes it's important to be willing to get into the fight. Are you going to actually be part of the army of the Lord, or are you going to be one of the standbys and kind of just allow things to go and see what's going to happen and not really get into the struggle? And that's something that each person has to kind of look within themselves. How much of a commitment do I want to make on the team for Jesus? Do I really want to get in there and try to make some kind of difference? Do I want to do or say something that will matter? Or do I want to just kind of sit and wait and see what happens? And so Jephthah calls him out. He goes, we called you, man. We told you all about what was going on, and you chose to do nothing. All right, let's see how what that produces. Look at verse 3. And when I saw that ye delivered me not, I put my life in my hands. He said, I just went anyway. Put my life in my hands is another way of saying I just ignored my fear. I understood that this was not a simple thing. This is dangerous. I could die. But I'm going to go anyway. See, fear is a problem, and it can stop you from doing things. Confidence in God, and that's why God called him a mighty man of valor. Because in spite of his understanding of the danger, which is a recognition that yes, there is something to fear. If the fear is I could lose my life. But he said, look what he said. I put my life in my hand and passed over against the children of Ammon. I was afraid of losing my life, but I went anyway. I didn't stop. And so bring that into our circumstances. How many things where we see the danger and the unfortunate consequences, and we go, you know what, I'm not going to do that. But yet it needs to be done, and it's the right thing to do. But it puts me at risk. It puts me at slight danger. And that's the personal development that we need so that we can continue to walk in the ways of the Lord, in spite of what may sometimes be a disadvantage that we may even see, and trust and believe God will bring us through. It's a whole lot easier said than done a lot of times. But it's important to know that's the avenue, and that's the angle we want to try to achieve to. But look what Jephthah says. He said, and when I saw that ye delivered me not, I put my life in my hand and passed over against the children of Ammon. And the Lord delivered them into my hands. See, and that's the key. All right? Because it was something that was orchestrated and produced by God. And that's all we should ever want. I don't want something that I can produce with my own strength. I want something that God can show me, my God-given gift. Can I work in my gift from God? Can I recognize my gift from God and then work in that? Can I see what God has put in me? What kind of person are you? Jephthah was a mighty man of valor. But you're mighty in God for what purpose? For what reason? For what task? And that's what you should be continuously seeking God for. What is it, God, that you have empowered me to do? And allow me to walk in that way under your strength, under your leadership, under your power. Right? It says, and God delivered them into my hand. Wherefore, then are ye come up unto me this day to fight against me? So it's like, why are you mad at me? Because God delivered me into these people into my hand. He delivered Ammon, our enemy, into my hand. And now you're mad at me because I defeated the enemy and didn't need you? But that's how a lot of things are. People have some very backwards ways of thinking and get mad for nonsense. They get upset for things that they should not be upset about. what we got to make sure is try not to make that you. Don't allow you to be the Ephraimites. Now, I'm going to be mad at something because I don't like the way you did something. Well, did they do it? Did they accomplish it? Were they successful? Did God give them the victory? Well, thank God for it. Well, yeah, but they didn't involve me. Okay, well, maybe next time you move on. And it works the other way. Sometimes you get the victory and people are coming at you. How come you didn't let me know what was going on? You didn't tell me. Well, I did tell you, but you chose to ignore it. You knew what was going on, just like everybody else did. Right? This thing was not done in a corner. Right? And so that even speaks to the Lord Jesus. People knew who Jesus was, but they chose to ignore. They knew this man came and he performed miracles. He did a lot of things. They knew he had every sign that showed that he was the Messiah. But they chose to do what? To not believe it anyway. And that's why a lot of the religious leaders turned out to be the enemy and the fighters against the work of Jesus during his day that he walked upon the earth. So Jephthah's like, why are you coming up and fight against me? Look at verse 4. Then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead. Oh, you want to fight? You come to the wrong person. All right? He gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought with Ephraim. Now here we got internal struggle again. See, this is the issue a lot of times that stops you from doing all that God has called you to do. Internal struggle. Now, we can talk about that from a cultural standpoint, a nation that has, you look at America, look at the fight we got between the Democrats and the Republicans. It's just awful, the stuff that we do. And so therefore, we can't seem to get on the same page to be able to accomplish the true things that need to be accomplished to solve some of the problems. Because nobody wants to agree with somebody else just because they're from a different political party, and in this case, because they were in a different tribe. And so Jephthah's like, fine, if you want to fight against me, hello, Regina and Calvin, just to let you know, we're in Judges chapter 12, right. And we're on verse 4 now.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So Judges chapter 12, verse 4.
Okay.
Okay,
thank you.
You're welcome. So it says, then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. Now we got civil war going on. And the men of Gilead smote Ephraim. So now Ephraim coming up all big and bad, right? And all strong, like, hey, we would have went in and fought with you. And now they're going to fight not against Ammon, who they should have helped Jephthah in the beginning to fight. But now they're going to fight against Jephthah and the people in Gilead. It's a sad situation and a sad circumstance sometimes when you choose to fight the wrong person. You're not fighting the proper individual. And so your fighting is going to be in vain because you're not going to gain anything from God because God has not deemed this person your enemy. Your enemy was Ammon. But now because Jephthah and the Gileadites got the victory, but they didn't include you or they didn't do it your way. Boy, this is political. This is what we see all the time. I don't care how successful the United States is. If it's the Republicans that bring the success, the Democrats are like, they didn't do it the right way. If it's the Democrats that bring the success, the Republicans are like, they didn't do it the right way. So it's always a mindset, and that's a spirit. It's a spirit of the devil that comes in. It's an evil spirit that continues to allow the inability to join and to work together. All it wants to do is produce division. And our cultural today is all about division. Whose side are you on? Who are you picking? All right? And so we have to watch out for that spirit because it all it does is break down and doesn't build. All right, let me just read 4 again. It says, then Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim, and the men of Gilead smote Ephraim because they said, ye Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among Manasseh. So what they're doing now is they're saying, and you remember in the last chapter when they kicked Jephthah out, they said that Jephthah gathered all of these men that had, some bad history and bad circumstances about them, and they went on out. All right? And so it seems as though Gilead was full of people that didn't have the right pedigree. Am I saying the word right? They didn't have the right history. They weren't born in the right family. Right? And so, Regina's laughing at me. But you know the word I'm trying to, I ain't saying it right.
Pedigree.
Pedigree.
Pedigree. Thank you, sir. Thank you. They didn't have that. So therefore, and a lot of times that's how you can be in society. Where you didn't come from the right family. You don't belong, live in the right neighborhood. You don't got the right kind of job. You don't have the right kind of wealth or circumstance. You don't have the right kind of political pull. And so Gilead was kind of that. But you got to keep in mind, remember the old scripture that says, is there a balm in Gilead? In other words, is there a thing of healing in Gilead? And the answer is yes, there is. All right? And so now Ephraim is saying, you are just, half-breeds, basically what they're calling them. All of y'all y'all from, we know that your leader is a son of a harlot, a son of a prostitute. That's very well known. And every one of y'all got some kind of backstory that is not proper, that makes you socially outcast. And that's fine. And that's what Ephraim is charging against Jephthah and all of those that were dwelling in Gilead. But it was these half-breeds, all of these cast-outs, all of these individuals that had no real place in the cultural of society of that day that got the victory over Ammon. That was the folk that God used. Sometimes God won't always use that very prestige line of people to get victory. Sometimes God can use the one that was born under the bridge to the drug addict, but somehow or another was able to make it through. And God uses that individual. Sometimes God uses that person that struggled and didn't have a whole lot, wasn't raised with a great childhood and all this feeling of comfort and safety and wonderful things and prosperity. They take the person that struggled and feared and didn't even know if they're going to make it from day to day and use them. And that's what we see here. And so Manasseh is basically, Ephraim is basically saying, you're just half-breeds from half Ephraim and somebody else, half Manasseh and somebody else. You're not even pure. Just insulting people. But yet, remember, they got the victory. They did the job. All right, let's keep going. Verse 5. And the Gileadites took passage of Jordan before the Ephraimites. And it was so that when the Ephraimites which were escaped said unto me, go over, let me go over. And the men of Gilead said unto him, art thou an Ephraimite? If he said nay. Now, what's happening here? So when Ephraim and the Gileadites began to struggle, began to find differences, and they now have war. The Gileadites won. They basically, they were a better fighting tribe, a better fighting clan, I should say. They weren't a tribe; they were a clan of people, a city, and they won against the Ephraimites. So, but now there were certain Ephraimites that escaped, and they would come down and they would try to pass from one place to another. And the Gileadites were like, if we catch another Ephraimite, we're going to finish the job because we know what you think of us and we know what you said of us, and we're going to eliminate you. And sometimes it wasn't easy to tell if there was one or another. Sometimes they would disguise themselves to say, well, I'm not an Ephraimite. I'm just trying to pass through. I'm from one of the other tribes. But sometimes there's something that can give you away. Let's take a look at this. Look at verse 6. Then said they unto him, say now Shibboleth. And he said, Sibboleth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. Then took him and slew him at the passage of Jordan, where they would kind of try to cross the Jordan River. And there fell at that time of the Ephraimites 42,000. Right, so there were some of them that escaped, but every time they needed to feel like they wanted to come by, there was a so-called password that you had to do. You had to say this word shibboleth. Now, what you say? Well, I don't get it. Why are they doing this? Because they knew the people of Ephraim had an accent. You know, when I grew up down in Alabama, I didn't grow up, but when I would go down to Alabama, my stepfather's family grew up in Alabama. They had certain words, like they would come up and say, "I'm going to walk down the street," and if you didn't know what they were talking about, you're like, "What's a street?" And that means they're going to walk down the street, right? And when they said they had a dog, they said we got German Sabbath. And like, German Sabbath, if you didn't know, well, German Sabbath was German Shepherd. Right? But they couldn't say the word right. And so your accent gave you away. There's certain accents, somebody in Boston, they go, well, I'm going to park the car. Well, this guy's from New England somewhere. Then you go down in that Texas area and you go, and they talk to you and they go, that little whining voice. Y'all better come on down here now, y'all. They're from that period, that area of the country. Or at least they were raised in that area where their accent took on that nature. Well, that's what the Gileadites, the Gileadites were just scrappy people. They're like, okay, you can lie to us all day long, but we know how to find the truth here. All right, you say shibboleth. And when they said shibboleth, they said, that's what we thought. You come right on over here. You about to get executed. Right? Because you are trying to fight and destroy what we're doing. So they were looked at as espionage. You're trying to sneak in here. And we're not going to allow anybody to come in here that we know is trying to destroy what we did. You're never going to see us as equals, because you're always going to remind us that we were outcasts. And so this is what happened here. And so unfortunately, you had this ongoing strife within the culture. Why? Because one person or one group or one tribe says, we're better than you. Now, what do you see in here? What is this? When you uncover this, what is this? It's another form of what? Racism. I'm better than you because of who my mama is versus who your mama is. Your heritage versus my heritage. Your upbringing versus my upbringing. And when people are always trying to find a way to prove they're better than another people, death always incurs. It's not growth. But unfortunately for the Ephraimites, God was with Jephthah. How do we know that? Because God said it in the very beginning. Jephthah, the one born to the prostitute, born to the harlot, is a mighty man of valor. That means God's hand was on him. And that's why he got the victory in the last chapter. And that's why even when the civil strife came up, he still got the victory amongst those that were supposed to be his brethren, his own people. And he still got the victory here. All right, look at verse 7. And Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then died Jephthah in Gilead, and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. All right. So we see here that Jephthah was successful in doing what God had called him to do for 6 years. Now, what you don't see, and that's an important thing, and that's what I'm going to point out here with these other judges that are listed. You don't see here where we saw it before with some of the other times where it says, and the people rejected God and served other gods. So it's important to recognize not only what's said, but what's not said. So according to what we see here, Jephthah continued to serve God. How do we know? Because every time the people left God, the the scriptural narrative tells us. And they forsook the Lord their God and served other gods. Now, when you got a leader, someone that is instructing and giving you counsel, and everything that they tell you is whatever you do, follow God. And when Jephthah was battling Ammon, he leaned on God. When Ephraim came and he said, why are you fighting against us? And then it said, and God gave him the victory. So those are important things to keep in mind. But let's keep reading. Verse 8. Now Jephthah's gone, and we're going to see another judge come up. Look what it says. And after him, Ibzan of the Bethlehem judged Israel. All right, so now we got this new judge. He's from Bethlehem, and he's judging Israel. And it says, and he had. Did I skip one?
Well, you're on 9.
Yeah, I thought there was one other person I wanted to bring out.
You coming
Okay.
up? Elon?
Okay. I thought Isban was the second one, but he's the first one. Okay, my own mind is twisting it. Okay, so let me read 8 again. And after Isban of Bethlehem judged Israel, verse 9, and he had 30 sons and 30 daughters. Seems like I remember that being somebody else. Okay, my mind must be I must be flipping it in my mind. But he had 30 sons and 30 daughters, whom sent abroad, and took in 30 daughters from abroad for his sons. And he judged Israel 7 years. Okay, so we got Isban, who judged Israel for 7 years. And my confusion is I thought there was somebody between Jephthah and Isban, but I'm wrong. I got it twisted in my thinking.
Okay.
But Isban came after Jephthah. Now, the thing about Isban is, once again, we see his description in verses 8 and verses 9. And what we don't see, and this is why I say it's important, we don't see where it says, and he served other gods. We don't see that. Now, what we do see is that he had 30 sons and 30 daughters. Now, somebody will look at that and say, okay, well, that's an issue. And yes, it is an issue. Because 30 sons and 30 daughters, that's 60 children. Right? Now, remember we saw another prophet, another judge, I should say, that had 70 children. And what was the thing that we recognized? He did not have all those children by what? By one wife. So he obviously was going around from one woman to another for various reasons and had these children. All right. But what he also is doing, look what it says here. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters whom he sent abroad. Now, that means he's sending them out, and he's sending them to other tribes and to other places to help do what? Keep the peace. We're going to see this as a strategy. There's somebody else in Scripture that does this as well. Solomon. Because if you got somebody that's kind of rocky, you send your daughter to go marry his son, now all of a sudden y'all got to tie together, and it's like, okay, you know what? We don't always see eye to eye, but we're family now. And that was the strategy that they would do back in those days to kind of keep peace amongst people that didn't always see things, the same way. So he's here doing this. You don't see where he had battles. You don't see where he's setting up chariots and sharpening swords. But what he does is he's utilizing the cultural aspect of intermingling the families and the tribes together in order to keep us and recognize we're all one family. And so he used that strategy to be able to keep the peace. So it says he had the 30 daughters and the 30 sons, and he took the 30 daughters from aboard for his sons. And so he got other women not from his own tribe and from his own town, but women from other places to come and marry his sons. So they had this exchange, and that was one way of keeping the peace. And you don't see any wars, you don't see any battles, you don't see them rejecting God. You just see this strategy of maneuvering our children in order to keep us all recognizing that we are all family. Now, it's not something that you would tell people and encourage somebody, well, this is what we should do today. All right? And you probably don't want to have 60 children by how many women? We don't know. It doesn't tell us. When we look at the one that does this later on, Solomon, we know Solomon had 1,000. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. So it's like, why? For what purpose? But he was doing it as another strategy of trying to do this to keep the peace. I get it, and it kind of makes a strategic sense. But the thing we should keep in mind that there is no peace without the what? Prince of Peace. So oftentimes a lot of our strategies are well-meaning. I'm doing this because I'm trying. Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you just try this? Why don't you just trust God? Rather than trying to do things that may work and but down the road, it will still produce a problem versus just trusting God. And so you see a lot of times people will develop strategies, and not to say that the strategies are ineffective, but they're not always pulled from a godly perspective. All right? There's no way you can actually say that God wants you to marry all these different women. And actually, when God anoints Israel to have a king, he's going to tell them that they should have one wife. But that's not going to happen either. All right? So for that reason, that just doesn't seem to be a thing that these kings and these judges do. Look at verse 10. Then died Isban and was buried in Bethlehem. All right, so he had all these children. He had a lot of heritage after him, but he died. Verse 11. And after him, Eglon, the Zebulunite, so we got somebody now from the tribe of Zebulun, judged Israel, and he judged Israel 10 years. Okay, so he did it for 10 years. We don't see anything here about him serving other gods, and we don't see anything about him, going away from the things of God. Look at verse 12. And Eglon the Zebulunite died, and he was buried in Ajalon, in the country of Zebulun. All right, so it don't tell us a whole lot about him, but it also lets us know that he did not serve Baal, he did not serve Ashtoreth. It just says that he judged for 10 years and then he died. It doesn't even tell us anything about his heritage. How many children did he have? We don't get any of that. And sometimes it's important to recognize that when you get a job well done, a lot of times it's just, okay, I had a good day. I went on and did what I had to do. It was par for the course. And there's nothing great said about it because I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. And I didn't do anything wrong, so nothing to report or to complain about. I did the task that was at hand. And a lot of what we do is like this. It wasn't anything unusual. It's just another day. I just did what I was supposed to do. I got it done. I didn't reject. I didn't get mad at God. I didn't curse God. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. And oftentimes, and this is where I was saying, a lot of our commentators that I read, not all of them, but a lot, they say that Eglon is a useless judge. And I kind of disagree with that. Because they say, well, nothing, he just born and died. They don't say anything about him. The man was there for 10 years and he didn't do anything noteworthy. And I get their point. I know what they're trying to say. Oh, he didn't do anything great. But not everything in life and every day has to be great. How about it just being what it's supposed to be? Doing what you get up, you do what you're supposed to do, and you did it. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing great, but nothing evil either. There's nothing evil said about this man. And I think that's where I would kind of lean on that. I don't lean on the commentators to try to say, oh, this man had a worthless reign. I don't think his reign was worthless. I think he kept Israel. What it says, without actually saying it, he did not allow Israel to serve Baal. You don't see that happening. He did not allow Israel to serve Ashtoreth. You don't see that happening. And he did it for 10 years. So if you read into what it's saying and also what it's not saying, I think he was a successful judge and did very well. All right. And then we go into the next portion here. There was another king, and we're going to see how these three, I keep saying kings, I'm sorry, not king, judge. We're going to see how these other three judges set this up, because this particular one, not a whole lot said about him, but there is something that we can pull to kind of get an idea of what's going on in the nation during his reign as being the judge. Look at verse 13. And after him, Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Paraphonite, judged Israel. And so verse 14, it says, and he had 40 sons and 40 nephews. All right, so now he's going once again into this aspect, at least for him, is letting you know that not only did he have 40 sons, but he had a sister or a brother that had 30 nephews. So that's 70 people. He had 40 sons, and then he also had 40 nephews. I'm sorry, 30 nephews. But look at this. That rode on 70 ass colts, and he judged Israel 8 years. Now you could just keep reading and say, okay, well, they got these 70 people, 40 of his sons and 30 of his nephews that were just riding on these ass colts, on these donkeys. Okay, well, what's the big deal? Well, that speaks on prosperity. It tells us that each one of them were wealthy enough that you could not only have a mule for doing your work, but I also got a mule to travel on. See, sometimes if you only got but a couple of mules, these mules are out there in the fields. They're plowing the fields. They're doing the work. They're carrying the load. But what happens when you got so many mules, so many donkeys that I can't put them all to work? Well, I use some of them to ride around in. Now, let's bring it to our modernistic day. What would we attend to say if somebody had all of these ass colts? Well, they had a whole bunch of Mercedes, BMWs, Lexus, luxury. So, what does this speak to? You look at Jephthah, you look at Isban, you look at Eglon, and now when you come to Abdon, the nation is prosperous. Right? And that means God is blessing them. They're being, when you become to the point where you're so prosperous that you can afford all these luxury rides, things are going good. And why are things going good? Because you go through these 4 judges, and not once do you see anybody talking about they left serving God and went and served false gods. You don't see that mentioned one time. And that to me is a key. All right? It don't say, and they did evil in the sight of the Lord. We don't see that action. Now we saw that before quite a other times when we were looking at scripture, where we see, and when we come next week, guess what we're going to see? The very first thing that we're going to see next week is, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. All right, and why? Because they went and served other gods. But staying within chapter 12, we don't see that. They had years, 7 years, 10 years, all right, of just serving and doing, and then prosperity results from that. Right? And so, finishing up verse 14. And he had 40 sons and 30 nephews that rode on 70 ass colts. And he judged Israel 8 years. And Abdon the son of Heliel, the Paraphonite, died and was buried in Parathon on the land of Ephraim in the mount of the Amalekites. So, what we see here in this chapter is a continual aspect. It starts off with a civil war, but then it finishes with the concept of them being able to just maintain the walk with God, and they were able to maintain the service of God. And some people say, well, but I don't see anything great here. Keep in mind, we're going to close with this. Good to see you, Mary. Unfortunately, we're almost done, but I'm going to do a quick little synopsis of it. The thing that I want to close with is this. It doesn't tell us any wonderful or great things about a lot of these judges, but it shows consistency. And that's the key. Can you each day get up and be consistent? I'm a servant of God. I'm going to serve God. I'm not serving other gods. I'm not going to do that. And you just day by day, one day after another, 1 week after another, 1 month after another, 1 year after another, I'm just serving God. And what ends up showing out in the end? Prosperity. God's goodness and grace. You get things, and you have the abilities to be able to have some form of abundance. If it's abundance in wisdom, abundance in affluence, abundance in character, abundance in wealth, abundance in health, abundance in nurturing, abundance in being able to be assistance. Whatever the abundance that God chooses to give you, that turns up and shows out. You end up with more than you can use, and it becomes something that you're able to use for other people, to assist and to help them. And that's the true nature. Once again, you become a light for God, keeping in mind, God does not want you to shine the light where light is already shining. You shine the light where? In dark places. And God will allow your life to be that if you stay consistent. All right? And you continue to do it. You ain't got to have no kind of super duper, global thing going on, no kind of super duper ministry. You just got to be yourself. Watch what God can do with you and continue on. And you say, well, my name wasn't written in the newspaper like some of these other people, or I didn't get a book written about me like some of these other people, or I don't have a movie about my life like some of these other people. That's fine. You can continue to be an Isban. You can continue to be an Eglon. You can continue to be an Abdon. Somebody that I'm going to just keep serving God. You don't got to write about what I'm doing. You ain't got to tell nobody. You ain't got to be on the news every day. But I'm consistent. I'm serving God. And ultimately, my descendants will see the benefit of it. God will utilize what I'm doing, and I will be able to pass on what I'm doing to the next generation. And they will see the prosperity of serving God. Now, I said I'm going to close with that. Let me actually close with this. Unfortunately, one of the biggest snags that we can have is when God makes us prosperous. Because then you begin to forget where you were before the prosperity, and you think this is just how it's always supposed to be. See, the person born in struggle knows about struggle and understands struggle is real. But the person that's born in affluent and wealth and doesn't have any idea of what it means to struggle, thinks that's just automatic. It's supposed to be that way. I'm always supposed to have what I want. I'm always supposed to have things go my way. And that's not how it is. And when that happens, they no longer learn to lean on God in the struggle. And even in the prosperity, they don't thank God. They don't see that, yes, I got this. I'm riding around on all these donkeys and these colts, and I'm thanking God for it, because it doesn't have to be. a lot of times when you have prosperity, especially when you're born in it and raised in it, you kind of think that's just the way life is. But it's not. If we would understand the grace of God, what would happen to us? The fact that everything just is not just falling apart everywhere is because of the grace of God. See, the wages of sin is death. And the fact that everybody ain't just dying now is because the grace and mercy and long suffering and goodness of God is in effect. And therefore, every time you see somebody walking down the street, every time you get in your car and you don't crash, that's the grace of God. Because the devil, the prince and power of the air, all he is seeking to do is to kill and to destroy. Right? And so that's all he's looking for. And the hedge around you and around all those whom God is protecting. And some people say, well, I can't believe these bad things happen to me. No, the thing we should be recognizing is I can't believe that in this world of sin, I get any good things. You see, when you underwater and you can't get your head above water, nobody is going to be amazed when they say, well, he was in the water, he could not get above the water, and therefore he drowned. Because he was in the water. So you expect to drown in the water. Well, what happens then, what would you say, if you're in the water and you just don't drown? I mean, you're in it, you didn't get above. Somehow or another, you're just not drowning. What does that mean? You got some kind of special thing going on then. The fact that you are in the water, you can't get above the water, you're born in the water, you ain't supposed to be in the water, and you don't drown. That's a miracle. Okay? Let's bring it to this. You're in sin. You're born in sin, shaped in iniquity. And the wages of sin is what? Death. But you've been in sin your whole life, and you still have eternal life. Why is that? The miracle of God. And that's the part we take for granted. It's not that when bad things happen, because bad things are supposed to happen. That's part of sin. But that in the midst of being in the sinful environment, good things happen all the time. That's the gift of God. The fact that you wake up and I'm not dying, and this isn't dead, and my health is and I'm able to do, and I'm able to think, and I'm able to reason. I got my memories, and I'm able to just thank God. Whatever it is that you can do, recognize that that's a gift of God, because that's not supposed to be in the environment that we live in. We do not live in heaven. We do not live in the new earth. We are still on this world where it has been inhabited and it is being controlled and manipulated by evil spirits and by the devil. We're on our way, though, to a land of milk and honey. We're on our way to eternity. We're on our way to a new heaven, a new earth, and a new Jerusalem. We're looking forward to that. So we thank God for that. And we'll pick up on this problem we're going to see in chapter 13 on next week. Any comments or questions on what we talked about today?